Hi everyone, welcome to the show.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
The Canadian government is cracking down on financial supporters of the illegal blockade that ended Tuesday, as they invoke the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history. But the question is, whose accounts can the government freeze? City News obtained the leaked document detailing the convoy donors who gave through Give, Send, Go, and found that nearly 40% of donations came from Canada, as visualized on this map. Extremism researcher Amarnath Amarasingham did the math and tweeted that Canadians donated a total of $4.31 million USD. So if you are one of the Canadians who donated, should you expect your bank accounts to be frozen today? An emailed comment from the Canadian Bankers Association says the required measures will be diligently implemented by financial service providers, but they don't expect them to impact the vast majority of customers. They also did not define what diligently implemented means. Canada's Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, also announced that order covers both personal and corporate accounts. But the Canadian Bankers Association said that we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. In Edmonton, Sarah Chu, City News.
So money is a social construct. In other words, it's confidence. If I believe that the dollar is worth money and I exchange it with you, then we both agree, and it's confidence that the dollar actually has some value. Now, when governments start censoring money to this, right, it's chipping away at that confidence. If I worry that my bank account's going to get frozen for some reason, I don't want to have that currency. I'd rather have something that I know is not going to get frozen. So when this happened, there was this report that showed that a lot of the Canadian banks were experiencing outages. So if you are worried about something like this, the first thing that you would do is withdraw your funds. Now, these banks have reported outages during that time period, and it looks like media is saying that this is just a rumor, but in my opinion, it's not. And you can see Canadian banks, ATMs are offline amid possibility that Trido started a bank run with their trucker account freeze. No surprise. This was predicted in my book, 2016, The Road to Ruin. And that, to me, is exactly what's happening here. And if there's a run on the banks, right, so fractional reserve lending means that for every dollar I get, I can lend out 10. So I don't have all the money that I've lent out. And when everyone takes away their initial dollar, I don't have all those funds to pay everyone back. So that's the danger with the run on the bank, is that the system's flawed to begin with. The fractional reserve lending model, you can't account for all the dollars that are in existence. So if everyone takes their money from the bank at the same time, then the bank doesn't have that and they default, right? So that's another shot at confidence. So this, in my opinion, was pretty big news, and this is more geared towards people in general. But if you're an institution, if you're a country, you also have to worry about censorship, and that's trustless blockchains. Now, the other thing, though, is they did talk about Bitcoin donations. Now, if you were to donate to something like this, what would end up happening is that wallet gets flagged, right? Now, if you want to exit, you want to sell your crypto for fiat, and you have to use an exchange, those exchanges have lists of blacklists that they're not supposed to do business with. Now, sending it from one wallet to another wallet doesn't really do anything. There's firms that specialize in that track every wallet that's ever been associated with that crypto. So know that, and don't do anything that you shouldn't do. iTrustCapital/Darren. If you use this link, you'll receive a $100 funding reward. And what iTrust does is iTrust offers crypto IRAs as well as precious metals IRAs. They have a pretty large selection as well. So there's a lot of tax advantages. There's by setting up your retirement with crypto IRAs, you can insulate yourself from capital gains. Now, if you don't know anything about IRAs, be sure to research them. There's a lot of incentives onto why you should own an IRA. And if you research iTrustCapital, I'm sure you'll find nothing but good things. Now, they offer $0 a month for personal accounts. There's a 1% crypto transaction fee. Gold is $50 over spot. So the fees are very minimal, and they offer real value. So be sure to check out iTrustCapital. Be sure to research iTrust, and please use my link, iTrust.capital/Darren. Now, today, President Biden has authorized sanctions against Russia. They imposed sanctions on Russia with SBRE Bank and Sberbank, I think you pronounce it, and some of the Russian elites. So they purposely cut off some of the largest banks in Russia, as well as they've also forbid exports to go to Russia. And that's what we were talking about before, about censorship, is on an international level, countries are afraid that their money gets censored, right? So if you're worried that your money is going to one day get frozen and shut down, this is destroying the confidence in the international markets. Countries are afraid that they'll get sanctioned and their money gets censored. Now, I'm not saying that, you didn't deserve any of this for what's happening there, but what I am saying is the confidence is a social construct that's being chipped away. Now, Short the FOMO, detected that there were some transactions happening in Russia with the XRP ledger. So there's a lot of transactions happening. I thought it was pretty interesting. So the Moscow exchange suspends trade on all markets, but there was still transactions happening on ODL. So I found that pretty, on XRP rather, not ODL, but I found that pretty interesting. Now, this is Rick Rule. Rick Rule is the CEO and founder of Sprott Global Resource Investments. Rick Rule is a highly seasoned investor, so if you haven't heard of Rick Rule, I suggest you listen to one of his podcasts or anything that he's doing, because it's pretty interesting stuff he has.
Just one more quote from Munger I want to share with you. He says, "I think the safe assumption for an investor in this current environment is that over the next 100 years, the currency is going to zero. That is my working hypothesis." And had I been the journalist conducting that, I probably would have probed them more on that comment, which I thought, was quite interesting. Now we know and have talked about all currencies end up going to zero, but I want to know what comes after that.
Well, let's look what came before it first, Daniela. You are a working journalist. If you look at the last 100 years, we didn't quite achieve Mr. Munger's goals. The purchasing power of the currency has only declined by 98%. But the fact that the purchasing power of the currency over 100 years, the last 100 years, fell by 98%, causes one to wonder. Let's say, just for fun, that Mr. Munger is apocalyptic and is wrong. Let's say that the purchasing power of the currency only falls by 98% again. It is not a happy circumstance. It is not a happy circumstance. And let's look at the rate of increase of the problem. Let's look at the fact that the last time we had an inflationary difficulty in the United States in the 1970s, that government debt to GDP was around 25%. Now government debt to GDP is around 100%, 120%, pardon me. The tools available to combat inflation at the same time that government fulfills its historic roles becomes tougher and tougher and tougher because we've spent our future over the last 40 years.
And I guess beyond Munger, St. Louis Federal Reserve President James Bullard cautioned, along the same wavelengths, that without action on interest rates, inflation could become an even more serious problem. Quote, he says, we're at more risk now than we've been in a generation, and this could get out of control. And he has called for a full percentage point in rate hikes by July. My question to you is it enough? Is anything they do at this point enough?
Well, they could stop spending. Government is a source of major demand, so they could stop spending, which would, I think, halt inflation in its tracks. They won't, but they could. Would 100 basis points be enough to halt inflation? Of course not. At present, the consumer price index, depending on how you figure it, is between 6.5% and 7%. Escalating, which is to say the purchasing power of the currency is declining by 6.5% or 7% a year, while the interest rate paid on the world's benchmark security, the U.S. 10-year Treasury, is at 2%. That 4.5% negative yield is what forces people to combat inflation. Inflation, from the average person's point of view, is simply the deterioration of the purchasing power of their savings and investment assets. Think about the fact, Daniela, that don't focus for a second on the U.S. 10-year Treasury, although I led with it. Focus on the fact that the junk bond index, that is credit compromised public bonds, now yields 4.7%. In an environment where the purchasing power of the currency is declining between 6.5% and 7.5%. In other words, people are guaranteed a loss before credit quality by buying junk bonds. If that isn't inflationary, what could possibly be? You have an incentive to spend, not to save. That's the nature of inflation.
All right, so you often see my research with central bank digital currencies. You hear me often speaking about central bank digital currencies. Now, what's going on right now is if you were to invest in a bond, you're going to lose money. You're guaranteed to lose money with the rate of inflation. In purchasing power terms, if you have a bond that's yielding 2%, and CPI is at 7.5%, you've lost, right? So with central bank digital currencies, what's going to happen is they put a burn rate on the digital currency. So one day you start out with $100, the next day $99, $98, etc. And when they do that, they're able to go into deep negative territory on the bond. So that's where this is all headed, because they have to go there. Every time that they talk about raising interest rates, they've run out of room, right? So a while ago they could raise it to 20%, and then the next time 15%, the next time 5%, the next time 1%, and we're at this point where they can't even move it up that much. They're talking about 50 basis points, which is 0.5% interest rates, and the actual CPI is at 7.5%. So why would you want to lend money to the government if you're going to get a negative return? All right, that doesn't make any sense. So, we're coming to a point where something has to be done, and I think that's going to be done with central bank digital currencies. Now, Goldman Sachs has said that they think the geopolitical uncertainty further lowers the odds of the 50 basis point hike in March. So we know that the Fed can't raise interest rates, and even if they did, it wouldn't work. Now they're saying that this might be an excuse for the Fed to say, you know what, we're going to keep interest rates low. So that's pretty interesting. Now this is Diego Osisis, and he is from Clifford Chance. And Clifford Chance is an international lawyer, and it's is an international law firm headquartered in London, United Kingdom, and a member of the Magic Circle, a group of the most prestigious London-based multinational law firms. It ranks as one of the top 10 largest law firms in the world. So listen to what he has to say.
In order for a CBDC being used to facilitate facilitate cross-border payments, it needs to be accepted on both sides. And this is where the question around interoperability arises. And I think it is reasonable to assume that some CBDC projects will end up being interoperable with others at some point. I think that is a reasonable assumption. But it is also a reasonable assumption that not all of them will be, which then creates the question, so how do you solve cross-border payments? And is this really the holy grail? I mean, some jurisdictions have already said that they wouldn't allow necessarily non-local residents accessing the proposed CBDC project. And so I think this is where the private sphere comes in, and this is where the private solution can really, add value and act as seize on this opportunity to provide a solution which allows a cross-border usage of CBDCs. Now, that can only be done if governments play ball. So, for example, if we were to, if you think of FX payments in the current space, in the current world, we have CLS Bank that does cross-border payments for some of the core currencies that exist, but that's being done on the basis of somebody taking responsibility for that entity, regulating it, applying certain controls on it, and it's been essentially vetted by a number of regulators and who got comfortable with the idea, and it's now operating the way it's operating. I think that needs to happen to achieve cross-border payments with CBDCs. It's probably not the same technology and not the same structure that you need for CLS Bank, but I think you need something similar. You need something that enables the cross-border payment usage and that is linked up to the various jurisdictional legal features of each CBDC project. And here, if we go down this rabbit hole, you've got questions around what is each CBDC? Is it a token? Is it an account? And, what technology is being used? Slightly different. How do you achieve the consensus? There's lots of practical questions around each project. And how do you make them all work together is probably through some sort of hub who is intermediating and achieving this. And I think that's the private sector's role.
So, in other words, the private sector role is going to be interoperability between CBDCs, or what Ripple's doing is a bridge asset, right? So we talked about the legal compliance in all these different jurisdictions. Every time Ripple announces an ODL corridor, what they're saying is they're compliant in that region, and we're watching this grow and grow and grow. So this is at one point going to be very important, and Ripple's involved with all these different areas and is able to do all this in different jurisdictions. They're able to branch out and provide the interoperability between the central bank digital currencies as well as the legal aspect of this. So the legal aspect is just as important. If you have a cryptocurrency that's in one of these places, right, that's on an exchange in one of these areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's cryptos that are extremely quick and efficient, but they don't have the legal jurisdictions that ODL is providing. It's in all these jurisdictions, and it can be used for that reason. So now this is Augustine Carstens. Listen what he has to say.
That would be very, very efficient, that would be very secure, and that would reduce dramatically the transaction costs. Something that Indonesia has put very high in its agenda in the G20 is precisely how to reduce the transaction costs and the costs and the reach of remittances, both internationally and domestic ones. And the key here is interoperability and interconnection. Therefore, many of our projects in the Innovation Hub has to do with interconnection and interoperability, because these really are the key components that can allow, a remittance from any country to Indonesia, instead of taking several days with very high costs, to be done instantaneously with very low cost. So I think those are the objectives, and I think there is where we have a comparative advantage. And again, Indonesia is a tremendously important emerging market, given its territory, given its presence in Asia, and also I think that in terms of financial inclusion, something that is very dear also for Indonesia, CBDC and CBDC-related efforts can be very important to accelerate financial inclusion. So we hope that we can make an important contribution in this line too.
So he talks about Indonesia being, having interoperability in Indonesia. So this post comes from Crypto Area, and it looks like during August 30th, 2021, that on-demand liquidity was being built out to Indonesia. Also, some of the RippleNet partners are in Indonesia. So Visa payments giant to use its Visa Direct system for sending cash to Indonesia. So Instarem partnered with Visa, or Naim partnered with Visa for their system to send cash to Indonesia. Now, listen to this other part. I found this pretty interesting.
And then digital transformation, because this is changing our world. There is tremendous force in innovation. Now that force can be very, very productive, but it also can be very disruptive. And therefore, to provide the adequate framework for the digital transformation to take place is of the essence. And that's what we have been talking about in terms of what the BIS can do. No, in digital transformation, it's not only CBDC, but it's also green financing. It's also, for example, other forms of financial infrastructure. Is RegTech, SubTech, is trade finance. Therefore, it has broad application, the digital transformation in the field of central banking and the financial system. So I think that the strategic plan for the Indonesia's presidency has been very well thought out, and I'm looking forward. And I think that we as a BIS can make an important contribution in the different chapters. In particular, for example, in energy transformation, right now, and here also Government Perry has been very important in the realm of the Asian Consultative Council of the BIS, in terms of the launching of our Asian Green Bond initiative, where basically we are issuing some bonds that are green bonds. At the end of the day, is financing for helping the fight against climate change, that are suitable to be part of the reserves, international reserves of central banks. So through this, basically, we're facilitating tremendously central banks to invest in green bonds. And we are issuing our Asian green bond initiative in a couple of weeks. And that is very important in the context also of all the efforts in the G20. We're also helping.
All right, so they're going to take green bonds and turn them into an international reserve asset. So a green bond's going to be acceptable for a central bank to own, right? So that's what's backing their balance sheet is a green bond, right? And we've also heard from the IMF that they're going to put a floor under the carbon credit market. So if you don't know what a floor is they're going to make sure the carbon credits don't get below a certain price. And then all the businesses that need to offset their emissions, have to invest in carbon credits, it's going to make sure that it's not below a certain price, and then everybody else buys the carbon credits at an elevated price. And it doesn't allow the free markets to actually dictate what the price is. Now, Deutsche Bank predicts that cryptocurrencies may dominate the payments market within the next decade. If that happens, digital assets will transform from a speculative investment vehicle to a common, practical asset instrument. So Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Bank's a massive bank that's in the EU. This is a Capgemini report. So I found that pretty interesting. And also, last but not least, this is Gilbert Verdin from Quant. Listen to what he has to say.
Anyone to build and benefit from a multi-DLT solution. So you don't have to be picking one or another blockchain. You can use all of them with our technology. So this partnership has basically allowed Oracle to certify us and our technology to be used for Oracle blockchain platform. And that's quite amazing for someone our size. We're able to access the Oracle customer base. We're working very closely with the product team, with OBP. We did a webinar together about a month ago, and we jointly presented and showed the tech working within Oracle. And OBP is a great way for us to scale. And we're getting new customers, and we're working even more closely with Oracle as a result of that.
So, Quant, the Overledger network, partnered with Oracle, and Gilbert's saying that he has access to all of Oracle's customers, which Oracle is a massive company, and their customer list is pretty vast. So, I found that pretty interesting. I hope you guys all enjoyed the show. Please tell me what you think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, everyone.